Funding for Off 90 is provided in part by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota.
Cruising your way on this episode of Off 90. We visit a microbrewer in Rochester. We meet an artist from Albert Lea. We learn about the tragic and inspiring story of a pioneer family. And we take a plunge in the icy waters of Eastside Lake in Austin. It's all just ahead, Off 90. Hi, I'm Barbara Keith. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Off 90. The interest in craft brewing has been growing steadily in the past decade. Beer drinkers are thirsty for a greater variety of flavors. To satiate their quest, microbreweries are popping up all over the place. We visited a microbrewery in Rochester to learn about the business of brewing.
We haven't had a brewery in Rochester since Prohibition. Kinney Creek Brewery just really started as a love for the beer. Home brewing. I originally started out with wine, and that kind of got to a point where I had 400 bottles in the cellar, and I couldn't drink it fast enough to keep brewing. And if I could make wine, why can't I make beer? So I started trying that out. When I first started, the first couple of batches that I did, when I started 15 years ago, you couldn't go into the local liquor store and say, I want an IPA or I want oatmeal stout. So when I got into homebrewing, you didn't really have those things to compare to. And you had to really go trial and error until you got the beers, what you liked, or even understand the beers you're making. And through the course of that 3 to 4 years after that was purely just understanding what beer other than something yellow was made of. Art or science? Beer is both. You have to have the artistic side of your thought process to try new things and to take it to the next level, but you have to have the science to understand what you're doing. And without one or the other, it just doesn't work, especially in the craft beer market today. I think from the artistic side, I really enjoy new hops. I really enjoy barrel aged. And by doing those two things really excites me in bringing something that somebody hasn't had in Rochester. Milling the grain typically will take anywhere from a half hour to an hour depending on the style of beer and how much grain is in it. And as we get that into a milled product, we put that into our mash tun, which we add water. Let that sit for an hour, stripping all those sugars, get in the boiled kettle, and that's where we add the hops. And once we get in the boiled kettle, that could take anywhere from 2 hours to 3, depending on the boil length. As that gets finished, then we bring it down into the fermenter, and the fermenter will actually, where we add the yeast will sit and take those sugars, make it into alcohol within the next, anywhere from 7 to 10 days. People started looking for something that's fresh, local, unique, and something that they could relate to. Because what we've had for beer in years past is not anywhere near where it's been the last 10, 15 years.
Your hours you were open, it's just great, we'll be there.
It's been growing, and they're looking for those different flavor profiles, something that is more complex. And by doing that, number one, you're getting something local, typically. Number two, you're adapting to what you're looking for. If it's something dark, something sweet, something that's got maybe a little more spice to it.
Sure, yeah.
Prior to the taproom law, the Brewery, from a straight up standpoint, couldn't sell direct to customer a glass of beer. There was a lot of breweries that worked really hard at changing the laws in Minnesota so that we could sell direct to customer, have a tap room so people could enjoy more than just a sample. In Minnesota, even as breweries go, we've got 3 dozen plus. We haven't even touched it yet, and that's one of the things that is exciting to me, because even within the next year, we hopefully will have a half a dozen here in Rochester. Right now, one of our elements that we try to bring to the table is a variety, and we have 14 different tap lines. One of them is a root beer, the rest of them are beer lines, and they can be anything from standard alcohol all the way up to 14% alcohol. Light, dark, hoppy, sweet. So that allows us to bring a different part of the brewery to any individual that walks in the door. If they like dark chocolate coffee, we've got stouts on tap. If they like the more sweet, the reds, we've got that also. The seasonal side of things is really complicated because you get so many different varieties of beer, so little time, and your typical seasonal is only 2 to 3 months. Right now we're bottling in bomber-sized bottles, 750s or 22-ounce bottles. On the nano size that we are, we do it all by hand. So it's one bottle at a time, and very labor intensive. We've doubled capacity 4 times in 2 years.
Wow.
So it's just a matter of trying to stay ahead of that growth.
And just if you have a good one, I mean, that's...
Right. And the day that we opened, we ran out of beer. And that was the worst day of my life. We like beer. We like that relationship that we have with the community.
So what are you brewing today? It smells so good.
I'm not actually sure. I think he was working on a new recipe.
Speaking of the customer is what really has made us what we are today. We've been 2.5 years in the making since we opened the doors, because our customers have comment cards on every table. If they like it, they don't like it, tell us why.
White House honey.
Okay, so like a honey wheat beer?
Yeah.
I think from a customer standpoint, the more relationship that you have with them on a beer level is really the key, because people are looking for something different. They can go anywhere and just have a beer, but they love the idea that they could come to the tap room, see the people or where it's made, and enjoy something as fresh as a few weeks versus a few months. We're always growing and we're always learning, and that's the fun part of it.
James Peterson has been creating all kinds of art since he was in elementary school. He creates sculpture-like art with dimensions, textures, and different materials. He creates what he calls functional art, like Lazy Susans that can be used to hold condiments on a table or as a centerpiece. James likes to reflect his emotions and creativity in his art.
My name is James Peterson, and I'm an artist here in Albert Lea. From my earliest days, I was sketching, pictures, drawing, especially on Sunday mornings in church when I couldn't pay attention, drawing pictures of whatever was on stage, or drawing pictures of my pastor or whatever he was talking about, trying to capture that. I have some art out in the garage right now that was in an art show in my 3rd grade year in elementary school. Art was always important. I always had a sense of balance and texture and color, and it goes back a long way. Our heart as parents, my wife and I, has been to provide a place, a home where creativity continues as long as possible, perhaps long enough that it's never lost. So, as a family, one of our goals was to create an environment where kids could play and create and not lose that artistic element that I think all of us are born with. I am moved to create when I see different materials available to me, and I want to see how they'll come together. I move to create when I'm feeling things deeply, and I move to create when I see a void, when there's something missing, and I want to fill that void. And so I have to create a space first where that can take place. And I do that in my garage most of the time. It's a multi-medium that I use. I start with a base, which is sometimes just a hollow core closet door that's been cut, into a shape that I want, or a piece of foam board. And on that, I lay a mixture that's like concrete. And then I work with different paints to create depth and color. Sometimes I'm shooting to create something that looks like natural stone that you would find, an expensive piece of marble or granite. Other times I'm creating things that you would never find in nature. I've shown at the Albert Lee Art Center several times. I've also had pieces in other locations, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Austin, and I hope to do a show in July in Fairmont. A lot of people tell me that my work reminds them of something from the universe, something like solar pictures, universe pictures, and the galaxy, that type of thing. And others will say that the colors remind them a lot of nature. So if there was a theme, it would be nature itself. I have two different kinds of art that I do. One I call functional art, and one I call wall art. Or decorative art for a wall. And the functional art, which is a lot of fun, and I sell a lot of these at street fairs and on the internet. It's a Lazy Susan, a wooden Lazy Susan that I take and I create it to look like stone, or I make it look super colorful with wild swirls and textures. And I have a lot of fun doing that. I've had the chance to do several commissions now, which was an interesting experience for me. That's all new. As much as I've been an artist my whole life, I've never had anyone come to me and say, "Would you do a piece for my dining room?" As a pastor, I often think of myself as an artist of the soul, and having to bring different bright colors and dark colors of life together and make sense of them, not only for my own life, but helping a congregation do the same. There are paintings being painted everywhere I look, and the lives of people. The lives of people are pieces of art, and I think of people's lives that way. And I think that's how people interact too. I mean, we bring ourselves to each other, and we talk to each other, and we connect in very mysterious ways. I think people do the same with art.
A gravestone inscription led author Dan Munson on a search through early Minnesota history. He discovered that the descendants of 4 siblings orphaned by the Dakota War now live all around him. Those descendants kept many family records, which Dan used to write his book, Malice Toward None, Abraham Lincoln, the Civil War, the Homestead Act, and the massacre and heartening survival of the Kokendorfers, a Minnesota history.
The Kokendorfers are, to me, very representative of the difficulties that were overcome by Minnesotans during the formative years of the state's history. I think that their family story resonates with many people who have similar stories, perhaps, or who have stories maybe aren't as dramatic as the Kokendorfer story, but are, I think, very meaningful to them in the same way. I'm Dan Munson, and I wrote a book entitled Malice Toward None: Abraham Lincoln, the Civil War, the Homestead Act, and the Massacre and Inspiring Survival of the Kochendorfers. I saw Abraham Lincoln as a pivotal figure throughout the history that surrounded the Kochendorfers, both because he was a lawyer in Illinois, very close to where the Kochendorfers were living in the mid-1850s, and he was the inspiration, the driving force behind the events that triggered the Civil War and the Homestead Act, which then resulted in the Kochendorfers taking up farming again near Redwood Falls. The book tells the story of the Kochendorfer family of Minnesota as their family story intersected with American history in the 1850s and 60s. And then later it tells the story of how well the survivors, the family, took care of one another and took care of the tremendous legacy that their surviving ancestors left them. Over a Memorial Day weekend, I was at Oakland Cemetery, which is the oldest cemetery in Minnesota, very near the state capitol, visiting some of the grave sites of my ancestors on my father's side. On the east side of the cemetery, there's a gravestone which reads Kochendorfer, and there are three names there, Johann, 38, Catherine, 36, and Sarah, 3 years old. The inscription beneath what reads, Victims of Redwood Falls Massacre, August 1862. But then I began later to ask myself the question, how is it that they came to be buried here at Oakland Cemetery, which is a good 100 miles from Redwood Falls? And I Googled the name. I learned a little, just enough to get me more interested. And then I went down to the Minnesota History Center and asked the nice people there if there was any information there on the Kochendorfers. And sure enough, there is a privately published pamphlet or booklet detailing the family story. The Kochendorfer family immigrated from Germany in the late 1840s. They arrived in St. Paul, early fall of 1857, and Father Johann had a team of horses that he was hoping he could use to perhaps start a farm, but he instead, given the price of land in and around St. Paul, decided to go into the drayage business, moving goods about town. And in his travels, he learned of the wonderful land that was going to be opened for farming in the near future along the Minnesota River upstream from Mankato. But he didn't have the money or the time initially to be able to do that. It was the passage of the Homestead Act in 1862 that allowed him to take his farming skills and then apply them to begin farming again in Minnesota. In the Homestead Act, a U.S. citizen could secure up to 160 acres of public land free for a very nominal registration fee. The Kochendorfers began farming on the north side of the Minnesota River, just upstream from Redwood Falls and just above the river valley. And on that morning of August the 18th, when some of the Dakota warriors began attacking in that area, the older children of the four, Johann, Rosina, Catherine, and Margaret, ran down into the creek ravine as their parents were being attacked. And they made it 11 miles to safety, where they waited for an ox cart to come up from behind them and caught a ride to Fort Ridgely. These four children are sent back by steamboat in early September 1862 from Fort Ridgely. They end up in St. Paul, and they are looked after by the members of the church that their parents had joined on arriving in Minnesota. Those 4 children, when they landed on the St. Paul landing, were orphans in the center of a continent. Those 4 orphaned children who were put with families in the St. Paul area in 1863 grew to adulthood and all started families themselves. The oldest son brought the remains of a father, a mother, and a small child back to St. Paul and had them reinterred at Oakland Cemetery, July the 8th, 1891. The detailed genealogy that is now kept by the family lists 1,000 or so descendants of those 4 children that were orphaned by those events in 1862. In my opinion, the family's success and the aid and comfort that was provided to them in very difficult circumstances in those days is a real testament to the good sense and charity of the people of Minnesota. I'm happy with the book. I think it appeals to different readers on different levels. It's not a purely history book written for historians. You'll learn some history as you read it, but it's the family story that I think carries your interest through, and that's the thing that's been so heartening to me as a writer, is that people who don't normally like to read history say that the book carried their interest quite well throughout because they wanted to follow the family story.
Plunging for Pink is an annual event of the Paint the Town Pink Festival in Austin. This polar plunge event was started as a way to raise funds for breast cancer research while creating a fun and creative winter activity that is wildly entertaining. Believe it or not, participants of the plunge actually raised money for the privilege to plunge into the frigid waters of icy East Side Lake.
Plunging for Pink is really a gathering of many, many people that want to help raise funds and have a great time while doing it to help aid the Hormel Institute in their quest to rid the world of breast cancer once and for all. There's other people that cut holes in the ice and jump into the water for a charity, but I don't know of anyone that does it for breast cancer research. And I don't know anyone that does it quite like we do here. It ties into the Paint the Town Pink. We're proud to be the first event last year. We also raised the most money. The first year we raised somewhere around $20,000, the second year $37,000, and here we almost hit $50,000 this year, right about $48,000. The Plunging for Pink event is located right here in Austin, Minnesota at East Side Lake at the boat launch. 215 jumpers. It took roughly an hour and a half to get every one of them on the ice, in the water, and out of the ice. As far as outfits go, we want something to be loud, kind of obnoxious, appropriate, but at the same time fun. So we saw people in tutus, breakaway pants. I myself always wear a suit and tie into the water. I'd say total volunteers, probably somewhere around 30 to 40 to be honest. We got to consider we have the entire fire department down here cutting holes in the ice. There's a lot of different coordinators. I'm just one of many. Joe Music's kind of been our captain the past 3 years. It really is a community-based thing with just a few of us taking a little bit more of a lead in it. I don't have any family myself that's been affected by breast cancer, but I do have friends, some of them dear friends, who's like either their wife or their loved one has been affected by it. It affects us all. I think we've all seen somebody touched by it, and I would like to help end it before it does reach my family. Well, I don't think I was always a public speaker, but everyone thought I was kind of a funny person, and I seem to be able to get in front of people, and whether I'm uncomfortable or not, I don't seem to show it. So they asked me to do it the first year. I think I had about as much fun as I possibly could have, and I wanted to do it every year since, and I have a great time doing it. And to be honest, there's no butterflies anymore when I go out there. It's just a lot of people showing up for a good cause and a great event. They're willing to have fun. So when you have an audience that wants to have a good time, it's pretty easy to do what I do out there. If you haven't done it the first 3 years, your chance for redemption is next year. Be there, do it. It's got to be on your bucket list. It's got to be on everyone's bucket list. And I assure you, it most likely will not kill you. Get in the water, get cold, have a good time, get out, dry off, and then celebrate with us afterwards. It's always a good time, and I don't know anybody that's ever done it and said they wish they hadn't done it.
That's all for this episode. Please help Off 90 meet its financial obligations by becoming a member of KSMQ Public Television. Give us a call at 507-481-2095 or 1-800-658-2539 or sign up online at ksmq.org. Thanks for watching. Join us next time, Off 90.
Funding for Off 90 is provided in part by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota.